Damian Sterling casually waved the divorce papers in front of her, yawning dramatically as Evelyn Reed greeted their relatives. "Here are the divorce papers. All the inheritance is mine now," he said with a slight chuckle. Evelyn, taken aback, replied, "How can you joke at a time like this?" Damian scoffed. "It's not a joke. You were always Dad's favorite, and I married you out of obligation. Now that he's gone, I'm taking control of the company, which means the inheritance is all mine. I don't need you anymore." Even though his father had just passed away, Damian's sole concern seemed to be the money. Evelyn felt a surge of anger at his words. She had endured his attitude for Richard Harding's sake, the man who had supported her immensely, but this was the breaking point. "Fine. You can have the divorce," Evelyn said, her resolve hardening. But she wasn't going to let him take control of the company Richard had left behind. She wasn't done yet. Evelyn Reed, almost 35, had been thrust into leadership when her father died in an accident at 27. Overwhelmed, she had no time to grieve, and stepping into the role of president felt impossible. She nearly gave up countless times, but Richard, her father-in-law, stepped in and guided her. As a close friend of her father's, Richard had been there from the start, rushing to her side and teaching her the ins and outs of management. His wisdom had been invaluable, and his support was a major factor in her success. After becoming president, Richard invited her to dinner and introduced her to his son. "Evelyn, this is my son Damian. He manages one of our branches, and we're looking forward to a closer partnership with your company," Richard said. "Nice to meet you," Damian greeted her with a warm smile. "My father has told me so much about you. I'm still learning, so I hope you can guide me." Damian appeared sincere and kind, and as the son of her father-in-law, Evelyn trusted him. They quickly formed a friendly bond. "I heard you took over your company at such a young age. Very impressive," Damian often remarked, flashing his usual smile. "What kind of business do you run?" Evelyn explained, "We're called Lake Charles Manufacturing, and we produce automobile parts. I'm still learning, but I'm doing my best to protect the company my father built. Honestly, I never thought I'd have the confidence to manage it on my own." Damian responded, "Lake Charles Manufacturing, huh? That's a new name to me. I know small factories are struggling these days, but I'll support you." He flashed her a slightly judgmental look, but quickly returned to his friendly demeanor. Though Evelyn felt a flicker of unease, she dismissed it, assuming she was just being overly cautious. They kept chatting while having drinks. Over time, Damian started asking her out more often, and 5 months after they met, he proposed. "Evelyn, let's be together. I've always wanted someone as strong and kind as you." At first, Evelyn wasn't sure, but she agreed because of his genuine attitude and her appreciation for Richard. A year later, they got married. During their engagement, Damian was always caring and kind. One morning, about a month after the wedding, while Evelyn was making breakfast, Damian suddenly asked, "So, when are you going to quit your job?" Evelyn paused, knife in hand, and replied, "I haven't thought about quitting." Damian frowned, clearly unhappy. "We're married now, right? I'm the president, even if it's just of a branch. You working makes it look like my income isn't enough, and that's not a good image for my employees." Evelyn explained, "But this company was my father's legacy. I can't just leave it." Damian snorted and said, "It's just a small-town factory compared to big corporations like ours. It's obvious which one matters more." That's when Evelyn realized the unease she felt when they first met was because Damian looked down on her father's company, seeing it as nothing more than a small factory. "Damian, that's not fair. My company has important partners and employees. I can't just abandon it." "Partners and employees? Come on, Evelyn, that's nothing. It's obvious your little factory is nothing compared to even one of our branches," Damian said dismissively. Evelyn was speechless. He clearly didn't understand the responsibility that comes with running a business, no matter its size. She took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "Damian, the value of a company isn't in how big it is. Even small companies matter. I get it, it's important to you, he said, but be real. There's no way a company run by someone as inexperienced as you was going to survive. Damien's words were filled with contempt, and his attitude shocked Evelyn. Her father had always been a kind leader who cared about his employees. She admired him for that, but Damien was insulting everything her father had worked for. She felt her anger rising, but she tried to hold it in. She barely managed to respond. Damien, our companies might be different in size, but our employees and partners are important. It's wrong to look down on them or my company like that. Please stop calling it just a small-town factory. So what? It is just a local business, right? Damien replied. Our company deals with bigger products like cars and appliances. The difference in scale is obvious. This is why it's tough dealing with beginners, he added with a sigh, clearly frustrated. I'll have breakfast out, he muttered and left for work without waiting for her to respond. Left alone, Evelyn stood there in silence, and then the tears she had been holding back began to fall. Wiping them away, she cleaned up the breakfast dishes, feeling a mix of frustration, sadness, and disappointment. Her emotions were all tangled up, especially her growing dislike for Damien. That evening, when Evelyn returned home, feeling utterly drained, she was taken aback to find Damien already there. As she opened the door, the delicious aroma of dinner wafted through the house. I'm home, she said softly. Damien emerged from the kitchen, his tone much warmer than it had been earlier that day. Welcome back, Evelyn, he said. Evelyn paused, unsure of what to make of the sudden shift, but before she could respond, he continued. I owe you an apology for what I said this morning, he admitted. I was stressed from work and took it out on you. I shouldn't have done that, he said, his apology genuine. Seeing him genuinely regret his words began to melt away some of her frustration. I made dinner as a peace offering, Damien added with a sheepish grin. I'm not sure how it'll turn out, though. His words brought a small smile to Evelyn's face, despite herself. Thank you. I really appreciate it, she said, grateful for his effort. They sat down to eat together, and while the meal was nothing extravagant, his gesture made it taste better. It's good, thanks, Damien, Evelyn said quietly. Damien's smile deepened, as though her words had lifted his spirits, and for a brief moment, it felt like their conflict had passed. However, things soon began to change. Damien reverted to his earlier kindness for a while, but gradually, his attitude grew colder. Over time, his comments about her company became increasingly critical. After a year of marriage, his demeanor shifted, and he began to behave as if he were in charge, making more and more demands. One evening, after a long day at work, Evelyn returned home late to find Damien lounging on the sofa. Oh, finally back, huh? What time do you think it is, Madam President? He said with a sarcastic tone. I'm sorry, I had an unexpected meeting. I'll make dinner right away, Evelyn apologized, hurrying to the kitchen. Damien scoffed, clearly unimpressed. A meeting, huh? Were you really working overtime? Is the president of a small-town factory that busy? He mocked. Evelyn said nothing, focusing on preparing the meal in silence. Their relationship continued to deteriorate. No longer satisfied with just her formal apologies, Damien confronted her one day, his tone icy. Evelyn, do you even realize how you're living your life? You act like you're just the president of some small-town factory. Internally, Evelyn felt a spark of defiance, but she remained silent, knowing that maintaining good relations with his company was crucial for hers. She stopped responding, but that didn't mean her feelings weren't hurt. Struggling to keep her temper in check, she replied in a soft, shaky voice, I live thanks to your support, and I appreciate it. This only served to enrage Damien further. If you're truly grateful, show it, he snapped. Apologize properly, and I'll forgive you. Evelyn bit down on her lip to stop herself from reacting. What's the matter? Can't you do that? If not, fine. I'll end our business relationship with your company, Damien said, his voice dripping with disdain. I can crush it whenever I want. If you don't apologize, I'm done working with you." His words disgusted Evelyn, but she knew she had to protect her company. Though she tried to apologize, her pride held her back and she hesitated. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up," he demanded. Pushed by his words, Evelyn finally said, "Please keep doing business with us. I beg you." Seeing her beg, Damien laughed smugly. "Pathetic. And to think you're supposed to be a president," he said, full of contempt. She felt frustrated, but she had no choice. She gave in to his threat to protect her company and quietly endured the situation for years. Into their marriage, Damien's arrogant behavior got worse, and his criticism of her and her company increased. Every time Evelyn came home, she was almost always met with his harsh words. "How late can you be? How long are you going to keep me waiting?" he would say angrily, then go on to complain about her and her company. "You've been working late a lot." "What? Is your company about to go under?" "Don't worry. If it fails, I'll hire you after it's ruined. I'll spread the rumor that an incompetent woman destroyed her own business," he sneered. Evelyn resented him, but she knew arguing was pointless, so she stayed silent. Damien didn't like that and only got angrier, complaining even more. "You have no idea what it means to be a president. You're supposed to lead a company, but you can't even handle your job or take care of me. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be able to do anything, so you better try harder to please me," he said, then happily headed to bed. Evelyn felt both anger and emptiness after hearing his words, but she quietly cleaned up, exhausted from the daily routine. Living with Damien had become unbearable, but she held on to the hope that one day she'd be able to turn the tables on him. Until then, she just had to endure. That day came unexpectedly. She got a call saying that Richard, her father-in-law, had fallen seriously ill. She rushed to the hospital and found out he was unconscious and in critical condition. When she entered the room, Damien was standing there, looking lost. She walked over slowly and gently took Richard's hand. "Father-in-law," she whispered softly. His hands seemed to move slightly, but it might have been just her imagination. The next morning, Richard quietly passed away. On the day of the funeral, Evelyn wore her black mourning clothes and quietly entered the venue where many people had gathered. The number of attendees showed how much Richard was loved, and the atmosphere was solemn. She politely greeted each mourner and looked for Damien. When she spotted him, she couldn't believe what she saw. As the chief mourner, Damien had a bored expression, occasionally yawning, completely unaware of the disapproving looks from the guests. "Damien," Evelyn called out quietly. He looked at her for a moment, his face changing briefly, but then he quickly lost interest and went back to his indifferent demeanor. She took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "Are you properly greeting the people who came for the funeral?" she asked. Damien scoffed, pulled out his smartphone and said coldly, "It's too much hassle. You handle it." Evelyn watched in disbelief as he opened a game app. "Damien, this is your father's funeral," she said, her voice trembling, hoping to get through to him. He ignored her, completely focused on his phone. Occasionally, the sounds from his game cut through the quiet room, and she felt the uncomfortable stares from the attendees. Feeling embarrassed, she gently tried to stop him. "Please, just for today, put the phone away," she pleaded, but Damien shook off her hand in irritation. "Stop bothering me. Let me do what I want. I wish this funeral would end already," Damien muttered, his cold words cutting through the air. Evelyn stood there, stunned. She couldn't believe this was the same man she had once loved. His words showed no respect for Richard whatsoever. Eventually, the funeral came to a close, and as the family gathered for a meal, Damien's voice broke the silence, full of disdain. "Finally, it's over. Here are the divorce papers. I'm taking all the inheritance for myself," he said, laughing smugly, holding up the already signed papers. Evelyn stared at him, shocked. "Are you serious? How could you say that at a time like this?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Damien, however, didn't hesitate. It's not a joke. You were Dad's favorite, so I married you out of obligation. Now that I'm taking over his company, the inheritance is mine. With him gone, I don't need you anymore. His focus was purely on the money, even right after his father's death. Damien, this isn't the time for this, Evelyn said, trying to maintain some composure. Let's wait. No, we settle this now, Damien insisted, his voice cold and final. If you don't agree to the divorce, I'll terminate all contracts with your company. His words caused an uneasy murmur to spread among the relatives. Are you serious? Someone asked. Yes, I am. Ending contracts with your little factory won't make a difference to my company, Damien replied, his arrogance clear in his tone. Evelyn felt something inside snap. She had put up with so much for Richard's sake, but this was the last straw. Fine, I'll give you the divorce, she said, her voice steady despite her fury. Damien's grin grew wider as he handed her the papers. Make sure you submit them soon, he said, his smug tone unshaken. You can stay in the house until next week. With that, he walked away. Fury and frustration overwhelmed Evelyn, but she kept her composure. She quickly packed her things and checked into a nearby hotel, relieved that, without children to worry about, she could leave quickly. The next morning, she was ready to confront whatever came next. At the crack of dawn, she went straight to the courthouse to submit the divorce papers. Afterward, she called Sarah Chen and scheduled an emergency board meeting in 2 hours. When Evelyn arrived at the office, the board members were already assembled in the conference room. As she entered, they all rose to show respect, and once she was seated, they followed suit. I apologize for the short notice, but there's an important decision that needs to be shared, Evelyn said, her voice calm but firm. She noticed one board member nervously swallowing, and she continued. Some of you may have already heard about what happened yesterday, she said. Effective today, we are ending all business with Powell Precision Engineering. Please review our contracts and ensure there are no penalties for breaking them. Surprised murmurs filled the room. Powell Precision Engineering had been a valuable partner, but it was also run by Damien. After the discussions were wrapped up and the board members left, Evelyn walked over to the window, took a deep breath, and solidified her next step. Let's move forward, she said to herself. She called Sarah and gave her instructions. Prepare a notice to officially end our dealings with Powell Precision Engineering. Also, inform my ex-husband and schedule a meeting for 4 p.m. After Sarah left, Evelyn looked out the window again and whispered, Are you ready? This is just the start. Smiling, she headed over to Powell Precision Engineering. At 3:30 p.m., adjusting her suit and taking a deep breath, when she gave her name at reception, the receptionist replied politely, Miss Reed, you have a 4 p.m. appointment. Please wait a moment. Jessica Bell, clearly Damien's secretary, quickly came to greet her and led her to the top floor. Her heart was beating faster, but she kept a calm face. Once they arrived, Jessica knocked lightly on a large door. It opened to reveal Damien sitting in a big chair behind his desk in the spacious office. What do you want? Is the divorce finalized, or are you here asking for money? Damien sneered, dripping with his usual arrogance. I guess running a small-town factory gives you too much free time. There were no financial arrangements when they split, so he thought she was there to ask for something. Evelyn quietly sat down, took a moment to steady herself, and then spoke calmly. It's been a while, President Sterling. I'm here to talk business. What's with the cold attitude? He asked, clearly annoyed. Smiling slightly, Evelyn slowly pulled a document from her bag. I've come to deliver this, she said. As of today, we are ending all business with your company. She spoke calmly, and Damien's face changed color. Freezing for a moment, then he laughed, trying to brush it off. You're joking, right? Your company is cutting ties with us? It's just a small-town factory, isn't it? Damien still didn't seem to understand what was happening. In fact, Evelyn said, Powell Precision Engineering's business with Lake Charles Manufacturing accounts for 55% of your revenue. This will seriously affect your company. He stared at her in disbelief. "You're lying. I thought Lake Charles Manufacturing was just a small-town factory." "You didn't know, did you? Lake Charles Manufacturing employs 10,000 people and has annual revenue of $3 billion. "That's ridiculous," Damien started to argue, but Jessica whispered something in his ear, and his face turned pale. He finally realized the impact this would have on his company. Evelyn couldn't help but smile a little. But you never told me any of this. I thought it was just a small company," he stammered. "You assumed," Evelyn said. "Remember, you were the one who said ending business with Lake Charles Manufacturing wouldn't affect your company." She calmly repeated his own words, making it clear how much he had misjudged the situation. The loss of their business could ruin his company, and he knew it now. "Wait, I just misunderstood. I thought Lake Charles Manufacturing was a small operation," Damien stammered, trying to backtrack. "And if you're doing so well, why do you always dress so simply? You're joking, right, Evelyn?" His usual confidence had completely evaporated, and he now sounded desperate. Evelyn sighed, her patience wearing thin, and met his gaze directly. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said. "I follow my father's teachings. He never believed in flaunting wealth because he understood the risks that come with it. That's why I live modestly. You, on the other hand, waste money without a second thought." She gave a small, knowing smile as Damien's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment, and he fell silent. "Just because we're divorced doesn't mean I wanted to end business with Powell Precision Engineering," Evelyn continued, her tone steady. "It's been profitable for us, but recently there have been issues, quality problems, delayed deliveries." She paused, locking eyes with him. "And more importantly, your lack of moral responsibility. You ignored your duties as the chief mourner at your father's funeral, and in front of everyone, you handed me divorce papers, claiming all the inheritance is yours." "I was drunk," he muttered weakly, his voice lacking conviction. "I was upset about my father's death, and I had a few drinks before the funeral. It wasn't intentional." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but cutting. "For 4 years you've belittled me," she said. "You've never respected my work, constantly criticizing and insulting me, and yesterday you showed your true self. If that wasn't who you really are, then who is?" Damien sat there in stunned silence, unable to reply. Evelyn's words had struck him harder than anything else she'd said. "Working with someone who lacks basic ethics is a risk for Lake Charles Manufacturing," she continued firmly. "That's why we're ending our business relationship." "Evelyn, please reconsider," Damien pleaded, his voice now weak, desperate. "Our company will go under." She gave him a cold smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Your company will be fine, right? I remember you always said I could buy it out any time if I really wanted to." Damien's face drained of color. He had never expected his own words to come back to haunt him like this. "You bastard," he muttered under his breath, standing up and swinging his arm toward her in a fit of rage, but he stopped mid-motion. "Do you really want to try hitting me?" Evelyn asked calmly. "Go ahead. If you use violence, it'll only damage the reputation of Powell Precision Engineering. Attacking the female president of Lake Charles Manufacturing would be even worse for you." Damien's hand trembled with fury, but he slowly lowered it, his anger deflating as he realized the consequences of his actions. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. "This is goodbye," Evelyn said, her voice steady as she turned to leave. "Farewell." She heard Damien's distant shouts behind her as she walked away, but she didn't look back. 5 months passed since Lake Charles Manufacturing ended its partnership with Powell Precision Engineering. During that time, Damien's company started to fall apart. At first, Damien tried to save his business, looking for new partners and encouraging his employees. But when the news of their termination spread, the company's reputation took a serious hit. 3 months later, major clients began canceling their contracts one after another. Damien even tried offering desperate deals, which only made things worse. 5 months in, Powell Precision Engineering was struggling financially. Employee payments were delayed, and staff started resigning or joining other companies. Bankruptcy seemed inevitable. One day, Evelyn got a phone call. "Hello, Evelyn," said a weak, raspy voice. She immediately recognized it as Damien. "What is it?" she asked. "Please, I need to talk to you in person," he said, sounding desperate. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a plea for help. "All right, let's meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. at Lake Charles Manufacturing," Evelyn said, and after hanging up, she sighed deeply. She had already made up her mind about what she needed to do. The next day, Damien showed up 20 minutes early. He was a shell of his former self, wearing a shabby suit, unshaven, with red, tired eyes. When Evelyn entered the reception room, he quickly stood up. "Evelyn, thank you. I'm really glad to see you," he said, his voice shaking. "Please, I'm begging you to resume business with Powell Precision Engineering." "Why?" Evelyn asked coldly. Damien looked startled for a moment, but then spoke with desperation. "My company is about to collapse. I can't even pay my employees, and the pressure from creditors is getting worse every day." "That's the result of your own management decisions," Evelyn replied, showing no sympathy. His face turned even paler. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees and bowed deeply, pleading, "Please, just give me one more chance." The sight of him, once so arrogant, now humbled and begging, was pitiful. Damien, once full of pride, was now on the ground asking for forgiveness. Evelyn called his name, and Damien briefly lifted his head, showing a hint of hope. But she continued, "I'm sorry, but there is no second chance." Her cold words hit him hard, and she saw the hope in his eyes turn into despair. "But Evelyn—" Damien's voice trembled as he tried to plead again. Evelyn cut him off. "Enough. You belittled me for 4 years. Even on the day of your father's funeral, you crushed my feelings. There's no sympathy left for you." Damien lowered his head to the floor once more, begging for pity. "I've already apologized for that. Please, this isn't for me, it's for the employees." Her resolve was firm. Apologies couldn't undo the damage he had caused, nor the attitudes that led to it. This wasn't just about business. It was about respect and consequences. "If you had truly cared about your employees, it wouldn't have come to this. You only looked out for yourself," Evelyn said. Damien's shoulders shook as he pleaded tearfully, "Please don't abandon me." Evelyn calmly checked the time and said, "It's time now, President Sterling. Please leave for today." At that moment, Sarah Chen entered the room. She gently helped Damien up and wiped his tear-streaked face as she let him out. Around noon, Evelyn went down to the lobby where Damien was still standing, as if he wanted to say something. Before he could speak, a third person appeared. "President, may I have a moment of your time?" Ethan Carter asked quietly. Hearing the voice, Damien felt his knees go weak in shock. "Ethan? What's going on? Why are you here?" Ethan, one of Damien's employees, briefly glanced at Damien, then focused on Evelyn. "President, can I have a little of your time?" he asked. "Of course, let's discuss this in the conference room," Evelyn replied, moving forward. Before Damien could react, in a panic, Damien tried to grab her arm. "Wait, Evelyn! What is this about? Why is my employee here?" But before he could touch her, security stepped in. "Traitor! Ethan, you betrayed me!" Damien shouted. Ethan responded calmly. "No, Sterling, you betrayed yourself. You only cared about your own interests and ignored your employees." At that, Damien's face turned completely pale. Ethan nodded toward Evelyn, and they left the area, Damien's desperate screams echoing behind them. She didn't look back. Despite ending business with Powell Precision Engineering, Lake Charles Manufacturing continued to thrive. They hired new talent, entered new markets, and grew stronger. Their workforce grew to over 13,500 employees, and their market share expanded, making them a major player in the U.S. economy. Evelyn was recognized for her success and awarded CEO of the Year, gaining attention as a female leader in the industry. 6 years later, in the fall, Lake Charles Manufacturing stood stronger than ever, its future shining bright. Evelyn attended the grand opening of their new headquarters, standing proudly on the top floor and taking in the sweeping view of Miami. As she gazed out over the city, her mind wandered back to the journey that had brought her to this moment. In her speech, she ended with a powerful statement. "Adversity makes us stronger. We have the strength to overcome any challenge. Lake Charles Manufacturing will keep moving forward." The crowd's applause echoed around her, and the sound resonated deeply within her, affirming how far she had come. Meanwhile, Damien's life had taken a drastically different turn. His greed had driven him to make reckless financial choices, personally guaranteeing corporate bonds and misusing funds. His bad investments led to failure, and his involvement in fraud only deepened his debts, eventually causing his company to collapse. Reports indicated his total debt exceeded $150 million. Even after stepping down as president, the creditors continued to chase him, leaving him burdened by debt. Though he filed for bankruptcy, his past excesses had caught up with him, and he was forced to keep making payments. His payments were often delayed, and the accumulating interest only made his debt grow. Whether he would ever manage to pay it all off remained uncertain. One day, Evelyn saw him working part-time at a local supermarket. He looked much older than the last time she had seen him, his hair thinning, and his expression distant and empty. It was a sharp contrast to the confident man he had once been. Nearby, a magazine cover featured the headline, "Lake Charles Manufacturing President among the top 15 in annual income," while Damien silently stocked shelves. Seeing him in such a position stirred mixed emotions in Evelyn. The man who had once belittled her was now in such a hard place. She looked away and left the store without a word. In her personal life, things had changed for the better. 4 years ago, she met a wonderful man, and they had married at the end of last year. He had been incredibly supportive of her career, always standing by her side and trusting in her decisions. Together, they had built a strong, loving relationship, supporting each other and growing together. Now they were excitedly looking forward to a new chapter as they awaited the arrival of their baby next spring. Though Evelyn had some concerns about balancing her work and home life, she felt confident that with the support of her family, friends, and colleagues, she would overcome any challenges. The thought of becoming a mother brought both excitement and anticipation, and she was eager to see how much she would grow in the coming year. She remained committed to working hard to achieve her goals and build a fulfilling future. As she stood against the vibrant backdrop of Miami, Evelyn couldn't help but smile quietly to herself, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and hope. With a soft breath, she spoke silently to her late father in her heart. "Dad, the vision you had for the company, I've made it a reality.